A little bit of mist and fog around as well. And then later in the night, the cloud increases across Northern Ireland as another spell of rain moves in here. Temperatures, as I said, dipping down close to freezing in most towns and cities and well below across the northeastern parts of the UK. But further west, temperatures rising through the night as the cloud and the rain moves in. Spell of wet and windy weather. The wind's really whipping up for a time in these western areas as this rain band moves through. Northern Ireland should brighten up for a time before more showers come in. Wales and southwest England looking brighter through the afternoon. That lively spell of weather clears away but only opens the door to storm Eowyn. This is arriving Thursday night and Friday. Damaging gusts of wind are likely. A number of Met Office warnings are in place. Keep up to date with the forecast and those warnings on the Met Office website.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing, just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Aaron McLean, the goal machine here, used to play for Peterborough United. You bagged loads of goals for them back in the day. But I've got a bone to pick with you, young man. You scored at the City ground against Nottingham Forest for, was it Hull City?
For Hull City, yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, that was my job, unfortunately. I must say, that was actually one of my favourite goals.
Was it really?
Because I remember, obviously, playing at the City ground, unbelievable stadium, historic.
It is great.
So, and we beat you 1-0.
OK, no need to rub it in. These sports clubs, whether it's football or rugby or whatever, should offer 2 alternatives, either a professional footballer, or if you don't quite make it, you can still go and play football at a lower level, but have a career as well, maybe be an electrician or a plumber.
100%. You know, listen, I've had multiple conversations with various different people, whether it's the PFA or whether it's clubs. Even players who do have careers, you know, there's so many that don't make it and don't quite make it to the level or only play at a lower level. There's so many that do have long careers, but once you come to the end of that, you've spent, you know, for me, I spent 20 years as a professional footballer. Once I finished playing, what do you then do for the rest of your life? You know, at 35, once you retire, you still have to have a purpose in life. But I'd almost be starting from ground zero. I'm fortunate that I went into coaching and then went into the media.
That's good.
But for every one of me, there's hundreds that don't. And I've got so many friends who, I've got to say, you know, have really, really struggled on the, you know, mental health side.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, because you go from, like, playing in stadiums, big stadiums, small stadiums, crowds, singing your name, and all that sort of stuff, that adulation, the buzz of winning games, and, you know, the downs of losing games, and you go from that to sort of nothing when you finish. I mean, that's a big come down there.
It's a huge come down.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of January. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, ministers pledged to toughen laws on buying knives online as the Southport killer Axel Cabana purchased deadly weapons on Amazon with just a few clicks of a mouse.
Meanwhile, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says there are important questions for the Prime Minister to answer on Southport, but then fails to ask any of them at Prime Minister's questions.
Yes, very odd.
I also know that the thoughts of many will be with the victims of the Southport killings. There are important questions to answer, and I will return to those after the case is concluded.
Of that. And Carl Clifford, who shot Louise and Hannah Hunt with a crossbow and stabbed Carol Hunt to death at their home in Hertfordshire, has pleaded guilty today to 3 counts of murder at Cambridge Crown Court. We'll bring you the latest.
Elsewhere, did you see that bishop ask Trump to show mercy to LGBT people and migrants? Let's take a listen.
May not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
Literally are a criminal if you don't have the proper documentation, but that's
well, just skip past that. And Prince Harry, well, he's ended his legal action against the owner of The Sun today, as a settlement has been agreed and the newspaper group offers a full and unequivocal apology. But Harry's lawyer is now calling for the police and Parliament to investigate any unlawful activity. Gosh, there's a lot there to go at.
There really is. It's a busy Wednesday, but we're going to be across all of those stories and more. Particularly, is the Prime Minister's response to Southport the right one? Suddenly we're talking about what you can buy on Amazon rather than the repeated failures of a system to spot a clear maniac with an obsession for death. Why are we talking about what you can buy on Amazon?
Why do you think? Because it's easier. It's easier than talking about all the failures that have taken place that are to do with the government and the authorities and instructions from the government and the police and everything else. I know there's going to be inquiry, but how many times have ministers stood up and said, we're going to crack down on knives, whether it's zombie knives or whatever? And funnily enough, it's a problem with the perpetrators of these crimes. If he had a kitchen knife, he could have just got it from a friend's house, or even his own house.
Right, are we going to ban kitchen knives in their entirety? Because I'll tell you what, if Amazon stops selling kitchen knives, knives aren't going to suddenly disappear. There will always be knives, no matter what the government tries to do with the accessibility of them.
The only thing I would say, if he was underage, he should have been checked upon delivery. So the delivery driver should have checked his age, as they do when they turn up with alcohol, as they do when they turn up with other things.
He was 17. He looked pretty grown up.
Yeah, but it's the under-25
and the Labour Party, the Labour Party want him to have a vote anyway from the age of 16. So I don't quite see any sort of you know, how does that all fit together?
Well, gbnews.com/your say, are knives to blame or is something else to blame? Anyway, after your news headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. Just after 1 o'clock, the top story this lunchtime. Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch have clashed at Prime Minister's questions, with the Conservative leader accusing the Prime Minister of wrecking the Conservative government's legacy on education. Kemi Badenoch slammed the schools bill, calling it an act of vandalism and arguing it will attack excellence and hurt educational outcomes.
Teachers and parents will be horrified at just how bad this bill is. Even his own MPs may not realise it, but the bill will cut teachers' pay. It cuts pay for 20,000 teachers. It is an attack on excellence. It is an attack on higher standards. It is an attack on aspiration. This bill is the worst of socialism, Mr. Speaker.
However, Sir Keir Starmer defended that bill, claiming it will provide vital protections for children, including new measures to safeguard school attendance.
We had a young child killed who was taken out of a school by an abuser. This bill closes that gap. That is urgently needed. We have children who have not gone back to school since COVID. This bill closes that gap.
The owner of the Sun newspaper has issued a full and unequivocal apology to Prince Harry for previous and serious privacy violations and agreed to pay him substantial damages, settling what was a long-running legal battle just as it was set to go to court. The apology also extends to the late Princess Diana, acknowledging intrusion into her private life. Former Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson also received an apology for unwarranted intrusion during his time in government. The settlement follows claims that over 100 private investigators were unlawfully hired by News Group newspapers. Well, Prince Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne, has said that the illegal activity spanned 16 years and involved editors and executives.
The truth that has now been exposed is that News Group newspapers unlawfully engaged more than 100 private investigators over at least 16 years, on more than 35,000 occasions. This happened as much at The Sun as it did at the News of the World, with the knowledge of all the editors and executives going to the very top of the company.
In other news, a 14-year-old boy has been arrested in connection with the fatal stabbing of a 12-year-old boy in Birmingham on Tuesday. The victim, described as funny and sweet, was found with serious injuries and sadly died later in hospital. West Midlands Police have now also revealed the 14-year-old is being held in connection with an assault on an 8-year-old woman in the same area of the city. Well, Chief Superintendent Richard North has urged anyone with information to come forward as police investigators continue to figure out and unfold the motive.
This is an absolutely appalling incident. It's a very early stage of the inquiry. As I say, we have got specialist detectives working on the inquiry, but also supporting the loved ones of the 12-year-old that's very, very sadly and tragically lost his life. They're supporting her at this time.
And a former soldier has admitted murdering his ex-girlfriend, her sister and their mother in a brutal attack with a crossbow and a knife. 26-year-old Carl Clifford tied Louise Hunt with duct tape before shooting her and her sister Hannah at their family home last July. Their mother, Carol, wife of BBC commentator John Hunt, was stabbed to death, with Hannah calling police moments before she died. The killings have now prompted an ongoing Home Office review into Crossbow laws as they remain unregulated in the UK. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's back over to Westminster.
OK, well, it's 1:07. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, there are reports today that the police were stopped by the CPS from releasing vital information about the Southport killer, Axel Ritter-Cabana.
Yes, the Prime Minister has also revealed plans to redefine terror in this country, despite warnings it could overwhelm the police and security services.
And this all comes as Axel Ritter-Cabana was known and referred to the government's counter-terrorism prevent programme 3 separate times.
Perpetrator was referred to the Prevent programme on 3 separate occasions. A judgment was made that he did not meet the threshold for intervention, a judgment that was clearly wrong.
Well, the Merseyside Police Chief Constable, Serena Kennedy, says the force had wanted to say more about the Southport case at an earlier stage, but was advised not to, declaring it was not terrorism at the time. Let's have a listen.
At this time, counter-terrorism policing has not declared the events of the 29th of July a terrorist incident.
And today, Sir Keir Starmer has pointed the finger of blame at Amazon over the sale of kitchen knives.
So is this all really to do with how available kitchen knives are on Amazon.com? Or has the Prime Minister missed the point? Well, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now. Mark, this seems like an interesting focus for the Prime Minister, the availability of a knife that I'm sure all of us have in our kitchens, rather than perhaps some of the deeper questions there.
Yeah, well, the fact was this was a kitchen knife. OK, he bought it over Amazon. There should have been checks to ensure that the delivery of a knife was to someone who was over the age of 18. Clearly, there's a weakness in the system there. But the fact is, it was a kitchen knife. He could have gone into his own kitchen and taken out a similar knife at any point. The end result would have been exactly the same. But of course, it's a talking point, and a talking point that many others in the media seem to have latched onto as a particularly concerning aspect of this whole episode, and I'm not sure that it is the most important or indeed an important element of the crime that happened in Southport on the 31st of July last year. There are horrific feelings, of course, from various agencies who were alerted to the violent mindset of this young man and his very public desire to carry out a school massacre, who failed to respond in any meaningful way to that violent mindset, and then add to that the response from the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, and of course the government in the aftermath of the attacks, the lack of real information regarding some of the key details about this individual that really just created this void that was filled by rumour and speculation, anger and suspicion that the public were not being told the whole truth. And then the confirmation, of course, came yesterday from the Prime Minister and later from the Home Secretary that that was indeed the case. But they had done that for very good reason, because they didn't want to prejudice any upcoming trial. And you spoke about some of the comments from the Merseyside Chief Constable there. I can give you a more fulsome quote that came out in a statement yesterday where it's clear the police did want to give more information, put it into the public realm as disorder was breaking out in communities right across the country. She said, "From day one, we have been as open as we possibly could and have constantly been in touch with the CPS, who have advised us what information could be released. We have wanted to say much more to show we're being open and transparent, but we have been advised throughout that we couldn't do so as it would risk justice being delivered." Now, interestingly, a similar statement was issued by the head of Counter-Terrorism Command at Scotland Yard, effectively saying they were prevented by the CPS from revealing more. And yesterday, it was interesting to note that both the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary were at pains to point out that they were acting on advice too. So I think there will be some serious questions to be answered by prosecutors, in particular the Director of Public Prosecutions, as to whether they are being overzealous in their interpretation of the Contempt of Court Act, and whether they are overstating the risk of actually prejudicing any trial.
Absolutely fascinating, Mark. Thank you so much for taking us through all of that. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor there.
And of course, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, a former head of the Crown Prosecution Service, is currently the Prime Minister.
So he's not going to go against the CPS, is he?
Well, maybe not, or maybe he knows a lot more about it. I don't know. But someone who might give us some indications is our very own Chris Hope, live in the studio, dashed over from the Palace of Westminster. Were you surprised that Kemi Badenoch didn't ask any of these questions about Axel Rudikabana, the failures of the government and the death of those 3 little girls?
Great to see you both in person. I am surprised. Yesterday, the Speaker of the House of Commons lifted the issue of contempt before that statement by Yvette Cooper. So there's no problem with the trial now. The judge, of course, will sentence the Southport killer tomorrow. But right now, you can discuss issues. I'm surprised it didn't go after other issues of the day, notably borrowing up now. I think it's a big number.
£17.8 billion.
That's right.
For December alone.
That's right. I think it's and yes, it's more than $4 billion than they thought, along with the sluggish economy and the other areas, employment, of course, going down. All these measures going the wrong way for this government, Reeves in Davos, and so it goes on. I mean, there were ways to go after them on that area, or particularly Southport. The Tories are telling me they chose not to because it'd be quite hard to go, where do you go beyond the question of Amazon? I mean, I think Mark White was suggesting there that Amazon is a distraction from the main point about the Southport attacker, of course. But the problems are going back decades of failure.
You asked what Chris Philp asked yesterday.
Yeah,
the Shadow Home Secretary.
Yeah.
He asked quite pertinent questions, didn't he, about who knew what when, what the inquiry might cover. I mean, there were a lot of things that she could ask.
I mean, there's one particular question that we haven't yet heard an answer from the Prime Minister on, which is why couldn't we in August know about the Ricin and the Al-Qaeda manual, whereas we could know in October, both before the trial, clearly not a risk of being in contempt of court. Why couldn't we know that summer?
And that's why there's a review now ordered on by the Law Commission on the contempt of court rules, but it may well be the CPS were being cautious. The police, by Mark's reporting there, were quite keen to tell us all, and frankly, it may have helped calm the situation back in August. They felt that she acknowledged Southport, is the Tory party, that the issue, as they call it, educational vandalism, hasn't yet probably been aired. So the academy programme rolled back. You can't hire the teachers you want to teach. You cut salaries for some teachers. Of course, you heard from Labour there, the PM saying that breakfast clubs will be for all schools. School uniforms are cheaper, and children can't be taken out of school. There's a debate on education that we maybe haven't had yet properly, but they're trying to start it. But I don't know why.
I
ahead of
sense that Keir
Southport,
Starmer perhaps wasn't on top of what was actually included in that schools bill, because he kept going back to breakfast clubs, which is totally irrelevant to the educational standards.
The key point was academies and rolling back the cross-party consensus under Labour and the Tories, and everyone would accept in England they have lifted, I think, economic educational outcomes.
It's such an important topic, and we should definitely cover it on this show. I'm just not sure that today is the day to do it, given everything else that's going on.
It's happened before with them. They didn't go on farmers when the farmers were outside. You guys may be in the streets with the farmers when they were protesting. That didn't happen. Again, it's difficult. You have 6 questions, you know.
And you're trying to wrong-foot the Prime Minister. But Chris, thanks for being with us here. We're going to come back to you, of course, in the next hour. But more on this now. We're delighted to be joined by the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Alan, did the government miss the point here, talking about Amazon rather than terrorism?
Yeah, I mean, they missed the point on that score because, of course, you know, the issue is really the motivation of what was going on rather than the tool. They've also missed the point, as it were, by also looking at, you know, sort of, we must look at social media as a point rather than looking at the many referrals and the many times authorities could have intervened to stop him along the way. And the most extraordinary thing is that all of this is, in a sense, you know, not easy to understand. I mean, this was not the government in charge at the time. It would have been quite easy for the Prime Minister to have made a decision to say, look, we messed up, the authorities messed up. It wasn't on my watch. I'll promise to do better. I'm puzzled why he hasn't taken that track at all and instead gone down this extraordinary rabbit hole of trying to pretend these things aren't happening and that actually it's all Amazon's fault.
Yeah, it's utterly bizarre, isn't it? We've been here many times before. I mean, we're just hearing today about the crossbow killer. Of course, the immediate response was to try and ban crossbows or make it more difficult for people to get hold of crossbows, as if he couldn't have used another weapon. But, Alan, Kemi Badenoch didn't go on this today in Prime Minister's questions. What questions could she, in a parallel universe, have put to the Prime Minister today?
Well, she could have easily have put, you know, the question you posed earlier, is that Tom just said it. Why didn't you reveal the information you revealed in October in August and stop the riots, essentially? But look, the riots were caused by, you know, people, there were bad people out there who were determined to cause violence, but the approximate reason for them firing up was because of this lack of information being provided about the case. Now, we now learn that the government knew entirely what was going on at that point in time and chose not to reveal information that it then subsequently did reveal before the trial anyway. That was the point of, you know, kind of, again, an inflection point that could have been pressed on the Prime Minister and asked why you decided not to do that. You've made the argument that, you know, contempt of court, etc., or, you know, you're going to prejudice the trial. Fine. We understand that, and there are sort of ways around that, we think, as well. But let's focus on the very basic stuff. You knew things about Al-Qaeda training manuals. You knew he was watching beheading videos. You knew that he had, you know, sort of an interest in all these activities and was talking about ricin back in August, within days of the crime itself. Why didn't you reveal that? Because had that come out, I think that would have acted to, you know, diffuse a lot of the pressure that was out there, where people felt there was a real cover-up going on. It turns out they were right. There was a cover-up going on.
And that is the most shocking thing about all of this, just how much, well, the government knew early on and how much was missed in the 3 or 4 years before this attack. We now know that this is someone who had an enormously violent disposition, who had attacked people at his school with a hockey stick and attempted to attack others with other implements. Apparently, his father stopped him from getting into a taxi to go to a school wielding a knife just a week before it happened. How on earth were all of these signs missed? And it's just failure after failure after failure. And we just see today politicians wanting to talk about anything else.
But also, is expanding the definition of terrorism the answer either, Alan? Because there seems to be a lot of disagreement on that point.
Look, you know, there are lone wolf terrorists. We all understand that. We also know there are clearly mixed methodology people or unclear methodology people who don't particularly have one, you know, kind of divining right to what they're doing. But for something to be terrorism, essentially it has to have a political intent behind it. A message has to come out. It's quite unclear that this guy ended up, you know, sort of conveying any message. We don't know what message he was trying to convey here. So to call it terrorism per se, you know, and say that's the answer, we must we must, highlight it as terrorism. How actually would that have stopped anything previously from happening? He was referred to the terrorism programme, and they said he didn't meet the criteria. I mean, arguably, he wouldn't have met the criteria had you called it terrorism what he did either. It wouldn't have really met a criteria that could have acted in this way. What was clearly wrong was that there was an evidence of a violent person out there who had, sort of exhibited tendencies that he would cause violence and be happy to do it, and he wasn't picked up by anyone. That's the obvious point here. It's a really simple one. It goes back to what is going on in these programs that we don't have a sense of what bar you have to climb to actually be arrested for something or to be looked after. And by the way, you mentioned his parents. I mean, I credit his father for stopping him the week beforehand, but did his parents not think about this and go, my son is a real menace. We've got to, for his safety as everyone else, we've got to get him looked at and into care or whatever it might be to do this. And instead, they seemingly let him, roam around at home again. I don't understand
we never
that
talk
either.
about the
There's
family,
a lot of
do we?
unanswered
We don't
questions.
Talk about the parents' responsibility there too. Dr. Anna Mendoza, thank you very much indeed for your time. Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Lots to think about there.
I think that last question is very, very personal, and I hope that we learn more about it on Thursday with the sentencing. Did the parents call the police after he was pulled out of a car with a knife on the way to a school? And if they didn't, why didn't they? I think that's a really, really interesting question to pursue.
You've got to turn in your child. As Alan says, for their safety as much as everyone else's. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, the Crossbow killer has in fact pleaded guilty today to not one, not two, but 3 murders. That's next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Underestimate what you did, because to do it in their backyard as well, I bet they weren't happy about it, were they, Brad?
No, definitely not. Well, it makes it all the more sweeter. So they're usually pretty dominant in a 2-man event, but 4-man's usually where we can challenge them. And yeah, we managed to do it yesterday and put down 2 solid runs. And yeah.
So yeah, funding was a big issue for us in the last quad, but because of our results recently, we've picked up a lot more funding from UK Sport. So we're well funded now, and but yeah, the Bob is in the back of the van behind us, so we're driving it down to St Maritz as we speak. So yeah, that's how it all works in the background in Bobsleigh.
Brad, you're the pilot, correct? So you're up front.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? I always wonder, because I remember seeing John Noakes on. Do you remember John Noakes on Blue Peter when he fell out of the Bob and he ended up showing the back of his backside on TV because he had a big scar on there? What? So you've got the brake man. You're at the front. So where are you then, Aaron? Are you what number are you?
So I'm number 3. Yeah.
Right. So what do you do there? Is it just a matter of it's the running power is what it's all about to get off to a good start, and then you can sit and enjoy the ride?
Yeah, that's it. So for number 2 and myself, number 3, it's all about getting that Bob off the line and then just zipping it up to as high a speed as we can, basically. Getting in, staying low, having good aerodynamics, and staying still and let Brad do the work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable position for them, because we're bending them and twisting them into quite an uncomfortable position to get as aerodynamic as possible. And when you've got 6 times G's pushing you through that is not... Yeah, not
definitely
fun.
Stiff back this morning, that's for sure.
Because I'm just thinking where me and Eamon would sit. Is it 2 and 3, or would he go at number 4? What do you fancy?
I would be too frightened to do that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 1. Now, 8 men are on trial in Greater Manchester today, accused of multiple offences in Rochdale against 3 teenage girls, all aged between the years of 13 and 17.
OK, well, Charlie Peters is here to bring us the latest on this. Charlie, this is 8 men on trial.
That's right, Tom and Emily. 8 men on trial, but only 6 defendants are in the dock today at Manchester Crown Court. The defendants who have been charged with a range of child sexual offences, including 43 counts of rape, are as follows: Naheem Akram, Mohammed Shahzad, Nissa Hussain, Mohammed Zahid, Ruhiz Khan, Arfan Khan, Mustaq Ahmed and Kasir Bashir. Now, Mr Bashir is not present in court today and no description of his whereabouts has been provided. However, we did hear from the judge that Mohammed Shahzad is not present because he has a doctor's appointment on today, the opening day of what is expected to be a 12-week trial. Now, so far we've heard from the prosecutor in this case, the Crown, saying that 2 girls in this particular trial were essentially treated as sex slaves, that they were degraded and abused and sexually exploited across several years, predominantly in Rochdale. The prosecutor described how they were groomed and they were vulnerable and they were preyed upon by the men. They also alleged that the groups of men looked to them because they had troubled backgrounds and that they were groomed not only in the local area but also in snooker halls and taken around to alleyways and warehouses and filthy and sordid flats where the alleged abuse occurred. Some of the detail included from Rossano Scarmadella KC, the chief prosecutor, that the girls craved the attention that their home lives and families did not provide, which made them, he said, easy prey for older men to exploit. In some of the more shocking detail put forward, the prosecuting barrister alleged that the girls were lied to about it being forbidden for Muslim men to use protection. So he said that the men would allegedly engage in especially risky forms of sexual abuse, which led to really devastating scenarios for the 2 complainants in these cases. He said these men cared not a bit about transmitted diseases or unwanted pregnancies. There was also some horrifying information about footage being recorded of a particularly heinous moment of abuse, with the girl being blackmailed and threatened about that footage being released and told that it could be shared if she did not continue to have sex with many other men. Now, the court was told by the prosecuting barrister that footage, even though she followed those demands, was released and did reach her friends and her family. Further details heard this morning at the Crown Court just can't be shared because they are so shocking. But all 8 defendants deny all of the charges, and here at Manchester Crown Court, the trial continues.
Well, thank you, Charlie, if thank you is the right word, for bringing us those gruesome details of what sounds like pure evil. Thanks for being there with us and listening so that we don't have to.
Yes, 3 interpreters are being used at the court as well. Well, in other news, Carl Clifford, who shot Louise and Hannah Hunt with a crossbow and stabbed their mother Carol Hunt to death, has pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder.
Well, he denied murdering the 3 women during a hearing at the same court last year in December. So what on earth's going on here? With the very latest is our political correspondent, Adam Cherry. Adam, what's going on in this case?
Yeah, so as you said, he denied the charges in December, but now has pleaded guilty to the murders. So stabbing Carol Hunt and shooting Louise and Hannah with a crossbow, pleading guilty to those charges, and also pleading guilty to carrying an offensive weapon. He was in a relationship with Louise Hunt, and they obviously had, he then murdered her, having tied her up with tying her arms and legs, and shooting her. He shot himself with a crossbow as well. and today has pleaded guilty to those charges. They're now investigating this, or looking into whether they need to review the laws around Crossbows, a Home Office investigation into this. Although, you know, whether that's necessarily going to be the right thing. It's the same sort of argument we're having over Southport.
Yeah, Adam, I was just about to say, I mean, the government response to this, which seems to be, let's try and make Crossbows more illegal, sounds exactly like the government response to the Southport stabbings, which is the problem here, it's not the crazed, violence-obsessed individual who now admits to have done it. The problem is that you can buy a kitchen knife on Amazon. I mean, do you think the government response to this is in any way adequate?
I don't know. Look, yeah, it's a case of making illegal things more illegal, isn't it? You know, fine, he shouldn't have had that crossbow, but even if he didn't, he still murdered one of these women with a knife anyway, so what would have stopped him doing the same with the other two? It seemed like a waste of time to me. And actually, it didn't even appear in the King's speech, this investigation or this review into Crossbows, just after this took place. So it doesn't seem to be a priority for the government anyway. Maybe now, given that it's getting some attention, now that he has pleaded guilty to those murders, perhaps there'll be some movement on it. But again, it does feel slightly like they're looking at this from the wrong perspective.
Yeah, we know Carl Clifford was in the military for a couple of years, not for too long. Also worked as a security guard and killed the family of a BBC 5 Live racing commentator.
Yeah, John Hunt. Yeah, and also actually Carl Clifford's brother is a convicted murderer as well. He's serving a life sentence.
Oh, good, it runs in the family.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot of crime today that we're bringing you,
it is
but
actually
very important
shocking.
cases.
It's shocking how resonant these two instances are. I mean, in both cases, we've got a temperamentally, seemingly violent man killing women, killing little girls, killing girlfriends and mothers. This is a clear and present problem in this country, it seems, and yet the government is not talking about the men who did these crimes, and instead is talking about the weapons that they used, as if they didn't, as if Axel Rudikabana, if he hadn't bought his knife on Amazon, then people would be alive today that they weren't. That's clearly nonsense in my view. As if Carl Clifford couldn't get his hands on a crossbow, those women would still be alive today. Nonsense in my view. I mean, one of them was stabbed. I do think that there's
a more complicated discussion to have about the role of social media and internet. I do believe that is a more nuanced discussion. I think the question of accessibility of knives, I think that misses the point. But I do think there are a lot of young men watching very violent content online. I don't know what you do about that without censoring hugely. But it's a question that certainly is going to be spoken about more. But is it an excuse for the government to clamp down on free speech? There's always trade-offs, isn't there?
There are. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Don't go anywhere, because Prince Harry's lawyer has hailed today as a monumental victory for the Duke. He settled his court claim against News Group newspapers. Apparently, forget this, an 8-figure sum, according to one report. Goodness me, we'll be with our royal correspondent at the court after your latest news headlines.
All going to charity.
Very good afternoon to you. 33 minutes past 1. Sir Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch have both clashed at Prime Minister's questions today, with the Conservative leader accusing the Prime Minister of wrecking the Tory government's legacy on education. Badenoch slammed the schools bill, calling it an act of vandalism and arguing it will attack excellence.
Teachers and parents will be horrified at just how bad this bill is. Even his own MPs may not realise it, but the bill will cut teachers' pay. It cuts pay for 20,000 teachers. It is an attack on excellence. It is an attack on higher standards. It is an attack on aspiration. This bill is the worst of socialism, Mr. Speaker.
Starmer, though, says that the bill will provide vital protections for children, including new measures to safeguard school attendance.
We had a young child killed who was taken out of a school by an abuser. This bill closes that gap. That is urgently needed. We have children who have not gone back to school since COVID. This bill closes that gap.
Well, staying with news from the Commons, breaking this lunchtime, the Defence Secretary has issued a stark warning to Vladimir Putin after a Russian spy ship has been located operating off of the UK coast. Speaking in the Commons earlier, John Healey warned the Russian president, quote, "We see you and we know what you are doing," he said. The ship's believed to be used for gathering intelligence and mapping the UK's critical underwater infrastructure. It entered UK waters on Monday and prompted the Royal Navy to deploy HMS Somerset and HMS Tyne to track that vessel. The owner of the Sun newspaper has issued a full and unequivocal apology to Prince Harry for serious privacy violations and agreed to pay him substantial damages. The apology also extends to the late Princess Diana, acknowledging intrusion into her private life. Former Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson also received an apology for unwarranted intrusion. And a 14-year-old boy has been arrested in connection with the fatal stabbing of a 12-year-old in Birmingham on Tuesday. The victim was described as funny and sweet and was sadly found with serious injuries before dying in hospital. West Midlands Police have now revealed the 14-year-old is also being held in connection with an assault on an 8-year-old woman in the same area. That's the news on GB News. Plenty more still to come with Tom and Emily after this short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The weather's going to be ramping up over the next few days. Largely fine and pretty calm today. Tomorrow, a spell of wet and windy weather, and then Storm Eowyn arrives on Thursday night and into Friday. There's a little bit of rain here and there this morning. That's tending to peter out. But we've got some showers keeping going across North Wales, West Wales. There's some fog around too over parts of northern England. Quite misty and murky across the southeast. A little damp along the south coast at times. But that mist and low cloud really keeping the temperatures down 3 or 4 degrees here. Elsewhere, a bit of brightness. Could see highs of 6 or 7, but generally still on the chilly side. But at least the winds are light. It means the rain and cloud will be slow to clear from the far southeast. There'll still be a few showers coming into the far northwest, much of the east of Scotland having some brighter spells through the afternoon, but the clear skies here this evening will allow temperatures to fall back down to freezing pretty sharply. Fairly cloudy skies across North Wales, a few showers coming in here, 1 or 2 showers in southwest England as well. The dull, damp, dank, misty weather actually tending to pull away through the night from the far southeast. So many places having a dry night. Again, where we've got any clear skies, there will be some pockets of frost, and there'll also be a little bit of mist and fog around as well. And then later in the nights, the cloud increases across Northern Ireland as another spell of rain moves in here. Temperatures, as I said, dipping down close to freezing in most towns and cities, and well below across the northeastern parts of the UK. But further west, temperatures rising through the night as the cloud and the rain moves in. Spell of wet and windy weather. The wind's really whipping up for a time in these western areas as this rain band moves through. Northern Ireland should brighten up for a time before more showers come in. Wales and southwest England looking brighter through the afternoon. That lively spell of weather clears away, but only opens the door to Storm Eowyn. This is arriving Thursday night and Friday. Damaging gusts of wind are likely. A number of Met Office warnings are in place. Keep up to date with the forecast and those warnings on the Met Office website.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In North Yorkshire, the A64 remains closed in both directions between the Barton Hill Crossroads and the Old Malton roundabout between York and Scarborough after an accident early this morning. The Mersey Ferry is suspended because of fog. On the A1 in Nottinghamshire, there are northbound delays because of emergency repairs between Blythe South Junction and Junction 4 at Bawtry. In Staffordshire, the A50 is closed in both directions along Waterloo Road at Burslem in Stoke-on-Trent after a fire yesterday afternoon. Gatwick Express train services are suspended because of a signalling problem. Trains between Victoria and Orpington via Beckenham Junction are diverting via Catford because of a faulty rail. In East Sussex, the A27 is partly blocked westbound near Falmer to the northeast of Brighton, causing queues, and in Cornwall, the A39 is partly blocked by an accident south of Truro, causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 20-2. Now, Prince Harry's lawyer has hailed today as a monumental victory after the Duke of Sussex settled his legal action against the publisher of The Sun over allegations of unlawful information gathering.
Yes, so News Group newspaper, they've offered a full and unequivocal apology to the Duke of Sussex and will pay substantial damages, perhaps 8 figures, perhaps over £10 million, as the two sides settled their legal claim, Harry's barrister told the High Court.
Well, let's get the very latest with GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who's outside the High Court for us. Cameron, a huge day for the Duke.
Yeah, a huge day, Tom, and I suspect he'll be celebrating in Montecito this morning, and it is pretty historic, actually, because it is the first time ever in all the litigation The Sun has been involved with that they have admitted any kind of liability for their use of private investigators to carry out unlawful information gathering activities. They still deny at The Sun phone hacking took place. Now, News Group newspapers, as you said, offered Prince Harry and Lord Watson an unequivocal apology to the two of them. They also apologised for the intrusion into both Prince Harry's private life and that of his late mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. Prince William's office is not commenting on that specific part of the statement read out outside court earlier on today. But News Group newspapers also apologised for the damage inflicted on Prince Harry's relationships, friendships and family. Remember, last year Prince Harry said on camera that the part of the damage of his relationships with his family was to do with this constant pursuit of different newspaper tabloids in the United Kingdom. But David Sherborne, his lawyer, continued. He said that Rupert Murdoch's, and I quote, UK media empire has engaged in illegal practices after endless resistance, denials and legal battles, including spending more than £1 billion in payouts and legal costs to prevent the full picture from coming out. They said, his lawyer said, that they have, and News Group newspapers have a blatant disregard for the law, and that executives deliberately covered up their tracks following the arrest of a royal correspondent in 2006. Now, News Group newspapers have hit back this afternoon, denying those allegations. But David Sherborne, Prince Harry's lawyer, went on. Let's take a listen.
Many of those behind these unlawful practices remain firmly entrenched in senior positions today, both within News UK and other media outlets across the world, wielding editorial power and perpetuating the toxic culture in which they continue to thrive. It's perhaps no surprise that all of their senior executives and editors refused to turn up to court to give evidence. The failure of each of these key individuals to come and answer questions under oath spoke volumes in itself, but their collective silence is deafening. Today's result has been achieved only through the sheer resilience of Prince Harry and Tom Watson, whose willingness to take News Group newspapers to trial has led directly to this historic admission of unlawfulness at The Sun.
Now, News Group newspapers say if the trial did go ahead, then they would have been strongly challenging these claims and also would be bringing in experts to try and convince the judge that they are in the right here in terms of the trial that was going to be going on. Tom Watson, he praised Prince Harry for, and I quote, his bravery on behalf of all the victims of unlawful information gathering, and says he is going to be sending a dossier to the Metropolitan Police to launch criminal investigations. The Metropolitan Police says no documents have been received yet. No active criminal investigations are ongoing, but they, of course, will respond to any correspondence as and when they get it. But they did say something very similar when Harry won his case against the Mirror back in 2023, where Prince Harry called on criminal investigations to be launched. Nothing has happened with that in the 2 years since. So I would say watch this space and be cautious on that one. Both Harry and Tom Watson have also called on the Prime Minister to act.
Really important context there, that there might not actually be this sort of criminal set of reprisals, but certainly one to watch. Cameron Walker, thank you so much for being across that outside the High Court for us.
Yes, I wonder whether more people will pick this up in Parliament and put pressure on Keir Starmer to do something about this. I wonder how much sympathy or we at home people have towards Prince Harry and this. Of course, unlawful activity, unlawful gathering of information about your private life is pretty despicable. And some of the activities of the papers no doubt were. I just wonder, the whole issue of privacy, just can't quite get behind Prince Harry on that one, considering how much he's spilled the beans quite negatively about his own family in the press. You know, you talk about royal privacy, talk about the privacy that you didn't have when you were a child or in your younger years. I don't know. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Are you going to be toasting Prince Harry in this settlement?
Big questions, but do stay with us here on Good Afternoon Britain, because there's plenty more to come. Indeed, if you're in search for some winter sun, here's our special forecast for those top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The sunshine will be returning to Cyprus, but still a few showers around for the next day or so. Much of mainland Greece fine and sunny. There are the showers across Cyprus. They'll be clearing, as should the showers over Turkey as well. But remaining pretty mixed, quite cloudy over the Balkans, with a few showers in here and for northern Italy. It's been quite wet recently in southern Spain. More wet weather to come here on Thursday, and more showers to come across the Canaries. But it should be turning sunnier in Tenerife for the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
OK, there's your forecast. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. Yes, the government is expected to give its biggest fraud crackdown in a generation. Is it time to name and shame benefits bandits?
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We were talking earlier about the issue of Siri listening to you. Well, it's not just your own conversations being sort of harvested for data, but it's a problem with AI. So what seems to have happened yesterday is that Apple issued a alert saying that Luke Littler had won the darts before he had. I mean, imagine what would, if he then gone on to lose, how that would have looked. I mean, obviously, because he went on to win, at least they got the story right, but before it had happened. So what it seems to happen is that the AI farms existing stories, and what it has done, that's the alert. We can see the alert there now, and it also claiming that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal had come out as gay, when actually a different Brazilian tennis player was actually mentioned in the original story. So what it does is you see that's branded as BBC Sport. What the Apple AI system does is it farms alerts that it thinks people are getting from the source, and then summarises them into one alert.
Looks to me like you would assume, OK, the BBC are reporting this.
Absolutely.
So the BBC News might be saying something else.
So it could happen to any news organisation.
This has highlighted a massive issue. I mean, having editorial judgment and quality control, because if this is going on, it's just contributing to the flow of misinformation. Yes. And we know that this is a problem on social media, people reporting false things. But if it seems to come from trusted news sources, that is a massive issue in credibility. I mean, if you had something like Reuters, who's a big news provider, doing this, you could hold people accountable, you could make changes, but when it's the AI doing it, I mean, what do? You're going to have to reprogram it in some way.
And if you just lost control, if you're a news source, you've lost control of what goes out, because it basically farms it, puts your logo on it, and sends it out, even when it's nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 2. Now, the Department for Work and Pensions is launching its biggest fraud crackdown in a generation, so they say. But is this all just hot air?
Well, a new bill introduced to Parliament today could allow direct recovery of stolen money from fraudsters' bank accounts and ban them from driving for up to 2 years.
Well, is it time to name and shame those who abuse the benefits system?
OK, well, joining us now is Policy and Research Director at Policy and Practice, Rachel Walker. Rachel, the government clearly want to crack down on people who are fiddling the books, claiming money that they shouldn't be. Just how prevalent is this?
Not nearly as prevalent as these stories would make us believe. We're looking at around 3% of expenditure in the welfare system is attributed to fraud and error. So we're really talking about a system that's 97% working and 3% is error. So it's not nearly as big an issue as we think it is, but it is nevertheless, it does need tackling. We know that fraud and error in the system is unacceptable. And, you know, some of these measures here are additions to measures that already exist.
So what are the measures that are currently in place? What is this building upon?
Well, it's important to recognise that people can and do already go to prison for benefit fraud. We already do name and shame people in local papers and national papers. Committing benefit fraud has been illegal. It is already illegal. The new powers build on things such as being able to, you know, force deductions from benefits already, taking money from employment. So deducting money at source already exists. Taking money from people's bank accounts and banning driving licences are additional measures that I think the government are hoping will act more of a deterrent.
I mean, to be honest, rather than the fraud, which, yes, is a tiny amount probably in the grand scheme of things, I'm concerned just about the ballooning welfare state. Just how many children and adults are on disability benefit for things like ADHD, which at one time wouldn't have been possible. It seems as though, dare I say it, it may be quite easy for some people to claim benefits for things like that.
Claiming benefits for things like ill health is an extremely complex process, something that causes people an enormous amount of hardship, stress and anxiety already. And yes, there are stories of people claiming benefits for neurological or neurodiverse conditions like ADHD, but as it stands, the government considers those illnesses to be worthy of or legitimately worthy of benefits, and therefore that's the system that we've got. The welfare bill is large, it's 25% or thereabouts of public spending, so it makes it an easy target when we want to reduce what we're paying.
But it seems that today the government is focusing on the 3% that is, you know, government-recognised fraud in the system, whereas actually what the government wouldn't recognise as fraud, the money that we send in personal independence payments to people with anxiety or ADHD or some other form of mental ill health that has ballooned by millions of people in recent years, or by hundreds of thousands of people due to reach millions according to the forecasts. Would that not be perhaps a better place to find some savings?
Yes, absolutely, it would. And, you know, but we've got to think about the way and why people have these conditions in the first place. We're dealing with a poorer economy, we're dealing with lower household incomes, we're dealing with access to healthcare and health systems that, you know, are poorer than they were 10 years ago. So that we need to look at, we're putting our attention at the wrong end of the system. It's not about reducing how much we pay out, it's about helping people to not get themselves into these circumstances in the first place. Okay. And that's through health, education, employment.
Thank you so much, Rachel Walker. Really appreciate you coming on. Policy and Research Director at Policy in Practice. I am just concerned about the ballooning. Is there over-medicalising of young people? I mean, I'm just reading here that the Resolution Foundation did a study. They found almost a fifth of teenagers are now classed as disabled after the rise in ADHD diagnoses. I mean, seriously. And I just wonder if a lot of parents are seeking out these diagnoses for various reasons, from anything from, you know, being able to claim some benefits for the child or for, you know, having extra time in an exam. Apparently a third of kids are now getting extra time in exams.
I do not believe that 1/3 of children in this country are disabled. I don't believe that a third who are getting extra time in exams, or a fifth on disability. I mean, any reasonable person can see it's nonsense. Much more to come on GB News. Do stay with us for the Southport fallout.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, relatively calm tonight with a touch of frost and a few fog patches. A wet and windy spell tomorrow, and then Storm Eowyn arrives on Friday. Right now, though, kind of the calm before the storm. Not many isobars on the charts. The winds are pretty light, which is why we are going to see some mist and fog forming. Quite murky and dank and drizzly over parts of East Anglia and the southeast, but that rain and drizzle clears away. A few showers around the coast of West Wales, western Scotland, but many areas dry. Frost over northeastern England and eastern Scotland. In fact, many places temperatures are going to get pretty close to freezing, even in towns and cities, only 2 or 3 degrees. So a chilly night, colder night than last night, certainly across the south. Then here comes the spell of wet weather swinging into Northern Ireland. That'll eventually spread across most areas tomorrow. But before it arrives, still pretty calm to begin with across Scotland. There will be that frost and a few fog patches, but the breeze picking up on the west coast. There's the rain for Northern Ireland for the morning rush hour. Pretty soggy scene here to start the day, and that rain will be pushing into West Wales, southwest England as well. Then the winds pick up across Wales and southwest England, increasing through the day along the south coast of England. So we have a Met Office yellow warning for those gusty winds. The rain pretty unpleasant as it swings through. We haven't seen this kind of weather for a few days. Wet and windy spell spreading across all areas. Some snow mixed in over the hills of northern England and Scotland also. So a spell of wet and windy weather tomorrow. It does mean it'll turn a bit milder across the south. 8, 9, maybe 10 Celsius. Further north, another pretty chilly one, 5 or 6 Celsius. And then here comes Storm Eowyn. This is Thursday night and into Friday, crossing Northern Ireland into Scotland. Very gusty winds. We have an amber warning in place for Northern Ireland, central, southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. Damaging gusts are possible. Check out the warnings for yourself on the Met Office website and app.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you'd be thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Ministers pledged to toughen laws on buying knives online as the Southport killer Axel Rudakabana purchased deadly weapons on Amazon with just a few clicks. But is it relevant?
Meanwhile, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says there are important questions for Sir Keir Starmer to answer on Southport, but she fails to ask any of them at PMQs.
I also know that the thoughts of many will be with the victims of the Southport killings. There are important questions to answer, and I will return to those after the case is concluded.
Elsewhere, Prince Harry ends his legal action against the owner of the Sun newspaper as a settlement is agreed and the newspaper group offers a full and unequivocal apology. But his lawyer is now calling for the police and Parliament to investigate unlawful activity.
And did you see that bishop ask Trump to show mercy to LGBT people and migrants? Take a listen.
May not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
Well, we'll also be crossing over to Birmingham after a 14-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the fatal stabbing of a 12-year-old.
And shoppers have rammed vegan protesters with their trolleys in a Sainsbury's meat aisle. I'll tell you why. It's interesting that Kemi Badenoch didn't go on Southport in PMQ, seeing as she did mention it. She sort of flagged it as an issue and then moved on to the education bill. Now, I do believe the education bill is very, very important. Very important. It's a huge bill, wide-reaching. Keir Starmer only focused on the free breakfasts and making sure your uniform isn't too expensive. I mean, apparently now you're only allowed 3 items with badges, I think.
Right.
School badges to bring the cost down. I mean, is that as important as educational standards? You tell me. Anyway, he sort of avoided that discussion.
I mean, it's an important discussion to have, but is today the day to have that discussion? I mean, in her defence, the leader of the opposition did say that she'll be coming to Southport after the sentencing which is due tomorrow morning. So perhaps we'll see a fuller statement, no doubt a lot of activity in the House of Commons after that sentencing, because that's when we will hear directly from the judge's mouth, well, the entire background to the case, the entire case from the prosecution, which, of course, has now been accepted by the defendant with his guilty verdict.
But it just seems bizarre, doesn't it? Because Keir Starmer, at his press conference the other day, yesterday morning, wasn't it? He was on shaky ground when he was asked some questions that he didn't want to be asked by the press, particularly on, you know, why weren't certain details revealed at what time. And Kemi Badenoch could have made hay with that, I think. Anyway, but let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. And is moving this discussion onto, you know, banning Amazon from selling kitchen knives really the way this conversation should be going? Or is that a bit of a distraction? Let us know your thoughts. After the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock. Well, Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch have clashed at Prime Minister's questions, with the Conservative leader accusing the Prime Minister of wrecking the Tory government's legacy on education. Badenoch slammed the schools bill, calling it an act of vandalism and arguing it will attack excellence and hurt educational outcomes.
Teachers and parents will be horrified at just how bad this bill is. Even his own MPs may not realise it, but the bill will cut teachers' pay. It cuts pay for 20,000 teachers. It is an attack on excellence. It is an attack on higher standards. It is an attack on aspiration. This bill is the worst of socialism, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister, though, defended that bill, claiming it will provide vital protections for children, including new measures to safeguard school attendance.
We had a young child killed who was taken out of a school by an abuser. This bill closes that gap. That is urgently needed. We have children who have not gone back to school since COVID. This bill closes that gap.
And staying with news in the Commons this afternoon, the Defence Secretary has issued a stark warning to Vladimir Putin after a Russian spy ship's been located operating off of the UK coast. Speaking in Parliament earlier, John Healey warned the Russian president, quote, "We see you and we know what you are doing." The ship's believed to be used for gathering intelligence and mapping the UK's critical underwater infrastructure. It entered UK waters on Monday, prompting the Royal Navy to deploy HMS Somerset and HMS Tyne to track it. The owner of the Sun newspaper has issued a full and unequivocal apology to Prince Harry for serious privacy violations and has agreed to pay him substantial damages. The apology also extends to the late Princess Diana, acknowledging intrusion into her private life. Former Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson also received an apology for unwarranted intrusion during his time in government. Well, Prince Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne, said outside court today the illegal activity spanned some 16 years and involved editors and executives.
The truth that has now been exposed is that News Group newspapers unlawfully engaged more than 100 private investigators over at least 16 years on more than 35,000 occasions. This happened as much at The Sun as it did at the News of the World, with the knowledge of all the editors and executives going to the very top of the company.
A 14-year-old boy has been arrested in connection with the fatal stabbing of a 12-year-old boy in Birmingham on Tuesday. The victim, described as funny and sweet, was found with serious injuries and died in hospital. West Midlands Police have now revealed the 14-year-old is also being held in connection with an assault on an 80-year-old woman in the same area of the city. And earlier, Chief Superintendent Richard North urged anyone with information to come forward as police investigations into the attack and its motive unfold.
This is an absolutely appalling incident. It's a very early stage of the inquiry. As I say, we have got specialist detectives working on the inquiry, but also supporting the loved ones of the 12-year-old that's very, very sadly and tragically lost his life. They're supporting her at this time.
And amber weather warnings have been issued ahead of Storm Eowyn as the UK prepares to be lashed by severe gales. Gusts could reach up to 90 miles an hour in coastal areas, bringing the risk of travel disruption, power cuts and even flying debris. The northwest will see the strongest winds, but large waves and dangerous conditions are also expected along sea fronts nationwide. Heavy rain and snow will also spread east, with up to 25 centimetres possible on high ground. The Met Office says the situation could escalate as the storm rapidly develops tomorrow. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 7 minutes past 2, and there are reports today that the police were stopped by the Crown Prosecution Service from releasing vital information about Southport killer Axel Rudikabana.
Yes, and the Prime Minister has also revealed his plans to redefine terror, despite warnings it could overwhelm the police and security services.
It all comes as Axel Rudikabana was known and referred to the government's counter-terrorism prevent programme 3 separate times.
Perpetrator was referred to the prevent programme on 3 separate occasions. A judgment was made that he did not meet the threshold for intervention, a judgment that was clearly wrong.
Yes, and Merseyside Police Chief Constable said the force wanted to say more about the Southport case at an earlier stage, but were advised not to, declaring it was not terrorism. Let's take a listen.
At this time, counter-terrorism policing has not declared the events of the 29th of July a terrorist incident.
Well, today, Sir Keir Starmer points the finger of blame at Amazon over the sale of kitchen knives.
We are taking urgent action to ban zombie-style knives and regulating the online sale of knives. It is unacceptable that these murder weapons can be bought with 2 clicks.
Why is he talking about zombie knives? Not a single zombie knife was used in this horrific murder spree. What is the Prime Minister trying to say?
Yeah, now it's Amazon's fault. OK. We're joined by GBNews political editor Christopher Hope. Christopher, Prime Minister stands accused of missing the point.
Yes, with the Amazon cut down on the use of these knives and access to them. They're going to try and bring in live checks, maybe passports being presented. Currently, the rules are if you buy a knife on Amazon, I was looking this up, you have to prove your age when you buy it, and then when you sign for it, show an ID document from the Amazon driver. Of course, if you're not at home, you can't do that. I think it's, some would say, it's not quite the point, and there's an opportunity here for Kemi Badenoch in PMQs to make these points about the delay between August and October to make clear the terror link, which the CPS, in fact, the PM knew about as soon as it happened, the rice and the Al-Qaeda manual that had been discovered in the home of the Southport attacker. But the Kemi Badenoch chose not to. She chose to change the subject in terms of my political world and talk about a serious issue, but the changes to the academy programme, fewer powers that will be, they were saying will lead to a cut in £20,000, 20,000 teachers. It will other issues of freedoms to hire who they want for these schools. It's a big issue, no question. It affects millions of people. Of course it does. Or schools always do. But I just don't know why. Well, I do know. But they are telling me, the Tories, why they did this. But it seems puzzling, I think, to take the foot off the gas.
So why did they do it?
Well, they say that there's privately, they say there's not enough to go on over 6 questions. Right. You do one on the Amazon issue, one maybe on, was there a cover-up with the far-right issue, blaming the far-right for the trouble last August, but you run out of questions. So when you're planning to do questions, taking everyone below the line slightly here, you've got to work out how to make the best punches.
Kemi Badenoch has been accused in recent weeks of darting around all over the place, doing too many different subjects, not pinning the Prime Minister down. Sticking with 6 questions on one subject is important. And
if it's the right subject, Tom.
If the calculation here is that actually all of these failures of social services, of the Prevent programme, they all happened under the last government. It's a very easy response for Keir Starmer to say, hang on, this was on your watch, Kemi Badenoch. Whereas, talking about education, most independent analysis shows that English schools in particular got a lot better over the last 14 years. It's one of the few things...
And before that, Tom, under Labour as well. I mean,
that's very true.
It's cross-party,
whereas you can... I suppose the difference is that you can point to a place like Wales that didn't see the Gove reforms, which have slipped down those rankings. England has risen up. I mean, there was an extraordinary line that Kemi Badenoch used in the Prime Minister's questions today to say, poor children in England now do better than rich children in Wales. I mean, the most extraordinary statistic there. I can see the draw there, because, I mean, it's one of the things that actually the last government can stand up and say, you know what, we might have messed up a lot of things, but on this we did OK.
Well, Michael Graham and Nick Gibb, really. Nick Gibb was Schools Minister for most of the period, there's 14 years you're just talking about. I mean, the Tory party do say they did the economy was one they can go after. That was last week, they said. And they acknowledged Southport at the top, but they said they were keen to go on this educational vandalism, they say, and there's anger in the party from Kemi. Kemi Badenoch was at that school recently at the academy, did an interview with the Telegraph, I think, from memory. So they are concerned. In politics terms, in basic brass tacks, why change the subject when your opponent's on the ropes? And that happened today. And whether it was I think, some are saying, fine, good topic, good, but I don't know why you do that. It happened a few weeks ago when the farmers were outside the gates of Parliament. She didn't talk about the farming IHT issue, inheritance tax. Again, I think she's
learning... news radar, perhaps, like us, Christopher.
Well, I think she's learning her way, and, there's no right answer, but some are questioning it.
I just want to ask one really quick question about what the Prime Minister's spokesman was asked, and these are the political spokespeople that give the briefings after Prime Minister's questions. Private, behind closed doors, no cameras.
Yes.
But they were talking a lot about Elon Musk.
Yes, everyone does that nowadays, don't they? I mean, Musk has put himself into our political conversation with his tweeting about the grooming gangs and about Keir Starmer personally. It was asked in this huddle, this gathering of journalists with the press spokesman of the PM, what do you think of Elon Musk's hand gesture? Let's call it that, shall we?
Hand gesture.
I think you might see it on the screen now. Here we are. Here's him doing it. We were told by Dan Street that this is up to him. It's not something which ministers might do. It's up to the individual to justify it. So it's definitely they're treading delicately on this, I think, because they know they might try and sort of trigger an ally of the US president into more action. So they're saying it's up to him.
It's up to him.
Right. I suppose it's an interesting, like, a tried and tested method of sitting on the fence on that one.
Yes, exactly. I mean, would you be happy if a member of the Labour government did a Nazi salute? Was the question. The answer is no. So,
right.
I'm not surprised.
Right. Well, Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that. Political editor, of course. Shall we turn our attention to our Home and Security editor, Mark White? We're going to go back to Southport and the fallout from those horrific attack. Mark, the conversation today turning towards knives, the weapon that was used, how available these weapons are. Well, they can be used as weapons, a normal kitchen knife, and Amazon. What do you make of it?
Well, to be frank, I think it's a bit of a distraction. And actually, I've just been speaking to Norman Brennan, friend of this channel, former police officer, and one of the country's most high-profile knife campaigners. Now, he points out to me that there are hundreds of millions of knives in circulation in the country because they are in every kitchen, in every household. There are multiple potentially deadly weapons. The weapon that was used by Axel Rudakabana was not a combat knife, was not a zombie knife. It was a kitchen knife. And yes, he purchased that over Amazon. Perhaps more needs to be done in terms of some of the safeguards and checks that are there to ensure that they are not handed to children, these knives. But the fact is, he could have gone into the kitchen drawer in his own home, and the net result would have been exactly the same in terms of what happened on the 31st of July last year. The other issue, of course, that the government has been trying to press home is the availability of so much of this extremist content online. Well, we've had this argument for many years now after terrorist attack after terrorist attack and bids by successive governments to clamp down on what's available over the internet as such. But it has to be said, with Axel Rudakabana, the Al-Qaeda document, the PDF file linking to Al-Qaeda research, was not something obtained over social media. That was accessed quite independently of social media. And are we kidding ourselves into believing that evil acts are not committed by evil and twisted people unless they're accessing how and why and where to do it online? We'll tell that to the murder victim's mother, James Bulger. Back in 1993, this 2-year-old killed by 2 young, twisted individuals, 2 young children themselves. They didn't research how to do this online. So I have to say, some of what we've been getting in terms of talking points coming out from the government have been picked up and are being run, or other members of the media are running with these talking points. But I think it's important for us, for this channel, to also highlight what are important issues here of the candour or lack of candour that came from the authorities in the early hours after the attacks took place, when perhaps a difference could have been made in terms of the information provided to the public that might have prevented the rumour and the anger that swirled around, that then erupted in the most horrific violence in communities right across the country.
Absolutely, Mark White, thank you as ever for keeping us reality-based here on GB News. But let's get more on this issue of social media and the regulation that the politicians are pining for with the editor of Spiked, Tom Slater. Tom, we've heard this record before, haven't we?
No, absolutely. In the wake of any horrific attack, any horrific terrorist atrocity, we now see this regular chorus of, oh, it's social media's fault. We saw that in the wake of even the killing of David Amis, which had no connection to social media whatsoever. This was an Islamist scumbag who self-radicalised. And yet the discussion became about people tweeting mean things about MPs on the internet. I think that on the one hand, this is a displacement activity, as we've been talking about. There are lots of very deep and searching questions that need to be asked about catastrophic state failure in relation to the Southport murders. But there's also the way in which it's just kind of grist to a general political class mill, which is that social media is a problem and it needs to be clamped down upon. They see that policy answer in every scandal that is presented to them. So a mix of all those things leads us to a situation where we're again having a discussion about social media when we should be having a much more deep and focused discussion.
What about the issue of extremist content online, though, that can be shared on social media or could be shared, you know, in other ways? Is there, if Axel Ridder-Cabana was watching non-stop violent content that shouldn't have been available to his age group, is there not something there that could be done through the regulatory process?
I mean, that's one of the things where actually the social media companies are pretty united in recognising that that is a problem, that is something that they need to clamp down on. You won't even get any dissent from the more pro-free speech Elon Musk X platform about the need to make sure that these platforms aren't weaponised by Islamist propagandists or what have you, that you're not having just a proliferation, shall we say, of beheading videos that are easily accessible by teenagers and preteens. Everyone agrees that that's a problem, and there are many tools that have been put in place to deal with it. I think my fear is that this always becomes a creeping discussion about clamping down on social media more broadly, rather than a focused thing about how do we solve that specific problem as it's been isolated.
Rings in my ear this sort of the 1990s discussion about violent video games, as if that's somehow going to lead people on. I mean, I put it to you, Tom Slater, that Axel Ridder-Cabana sought out this horrific content online because he was messed up in the head. He wasn't messed up in the head because he sought this out online. The politicians are getting it the wrong way round.
Watching non-stop content, if he was, certainly wouldn't have helped with the mental state. Certainly could make you more violent, I suspect.
I don't think people
certainly
go
like,
out
you know, like watching
Al-Qaeda manuals
very
unless
violent
they're already...
pornography, for example, might make you more inclined to be violent in your own sex life. That sort of thing.
I'm not sure that there's any evidence to suggest that, like violent video games or like violent content online, I mean, anyone
seriously, Tom.
Anyone who's
so you're
online
saying
will
what
see the
you
violent
see
content.
has absolutely no impact. Sorry, Tom. Has absolutely no impact on what you may then go on to do in your own life.
I'm not sure there's any...
Well, then what's the point of culture, society?
I'm not sure there's any academic
your parents are violent,
rigorousness
you
to
might be more
back this up,
likely
but
to
should we just bring in Tom Slater for a final word?
Well, I think we can all agree that whether or not it's going to turn all kids into potential killers, they shouldn't be seeing that kind of material. Tools are in place to deal with that. They should be in place to deal with that. That's clearly not the issue here. This was a depraved individual who many state authorities knew about, and yet nothing was done. That's what our conversation should be about, I think.
Fantastic. Tom Slater, thank you very much indeed. Editor of Spite. Sorry for that little tiff that interrupted our interview there. I just think you can't deny that, you can't suggest that there would be if someone who is already a little bit unstable and already violently inclined then goes on to watch continuously every day violent content, do you not think that that might make them more inclined to pursue violence in their real life?
I don't know if we've got any evidence.
If your parents were violent, you might be more likely to be violent.
Yes, but that's genetic, isn't it?
No, not necessarily genetic. It's also from culture. Don't you think culture might have something to play in some ways, or the way you've been brought up?
I think
it's not all genetic.
I'm suspicious of the blank slate idea, that everyone's sort of born as a blank slate and it's just culture that makes people violent or otherwise. I think the psychologist Steven Pinker has done a lot of good work on this to suggest that actually the idea that we can just implant a personality on a blank slate just doesn't necessarily work.
I think if you're surrounded by violence, you probably are more likely to be violent because that's what you're learning. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. A bishop has blasted Donald Trump, asking him to show mercy to LGBT people and migrants. What do you make of it all?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers, and more people appear to be getting diagnosed with bowel cancer in their 50s. Not entirely clear why. And there was an inspirational woman called Deborah James who I actually met when I used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, and I remember meeting her when she had her cancer diagnosis and supporting her campaign, and she sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but it was a phenomenal campaign, and I think did inspire the nation. And this is so important. So people in their 50s are going to be sent these kits in the post. And I suppose my plea is just do not ignore these kits because you can deal with cancer if you catch it early enough.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is not the most pleasant thing to do, and a lot of us aren't used to it and talking about it and whatever, but it is essential, obviously, to do.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the other reason I wanted to sort of flag this is, I mean, we can sometimes make ourselves sort of pretty miserable looking at the newspapers, but this is undoubtedly a good initiative that the government have done this, and that campaigners have persuaded the government to do this. So, look, I just want to plea to everybody watching, if you get one of these kits, use it.
And, of course, I think it's really important within that to point out that this would not have helped Deborah, because Deborah was 40 when she died. And what's really important when you see stories like this is to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And if you have symptoms that are weird, it is important to go to your doctor and to talk about them and to take the tests.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying. That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2. Now, a 14-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder following a fatal stabbing of a 12-year-old in Birmingham.
Yes, the victim was taken to hospital shortly after 3 o'clock yesterday, but later died from his injuries.
Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson is in Birmingham with the latest for us. Jack, bring us up to date.
Well, the events that happened here have been described by the West Midlands Police in a press conference a little earlier on as chaotic and traumatic. As you've been saying, a 14-year-old arrested on suspicion of murder after the death of a 12-year-old boy. West Midlands Police confirming today that the 12-year-old boy was found by a member of the public not far from where I am here on Scribers Lane in Hall Green, in that part of Birmingham, with stab wounds, police say, to his stomach. An emergency ambulance called the police to the scene shortly after 3:40 p.m. last night, but it was 7:30 when that boy, 12-year-old, sadly died from his injuries. The family are being supported by specialist officers, and you might just be able to see behind me floral tributes already being laid here by members of the community who have described their emotion as raw and, of course, traumatic as well, coming to terms with exactly what has happened. Police continuing their investigations all day today. We have seen sniffer dogs around the River Cole, which runs along the Shire Country Park here, and police continuing those inquiries well into this afternoon and surely into the evening as well. But there was a press conference a little earlier on that was conducted by Chief Superintendent Richard Harris, who is the area commander for Birmingham. He gave this statement.
Now, as a result of urgent inquiries, a boy aged 14 has been arrested, and that happened at 7 p.m. yesterday at an address in Birmingham. He remains in custody and he's been arrested on suspicion of murder. The same 14-year-old has also been arrested for another assault for an unrelated matter, and he's also in custody for that. West Midlands have made a lot of progress, and Birmingham in particular, against serious youth violence and knife crime, but obviously in the context of today, that's a difficult message to put a lot of emphasis on, and actually dealing with this particular incident is a huge priority for us this morning.
Really interesting point that you heard there. Just want to make that again, that the 14-year-old who was arrested at 7 o'clock yesterday at an address in Birmingham remains in custody on suspicion of murder and also on suspicion of allegedly assaulting a woman in her 80s on Sunday, the 19th of January, not far from here near the River Cole. The press conference also described how traumatic this has been for the community, but the police say it is a positive that they've already made an arrest, but they still continue to remain open as their investigations continue. But one lady who laid flowers here said that emotions were still very raw, and she added that something needs to change. She says too many young lives are being lost.
Well, it's such a serious story, and Jack Carson, thank you for being there with us, covering it for us. I really appreciate your time this afternoon on Good Afternoon Britain.
Another stabbing. Birmingham's the second worst city, isn't it, for knife crime. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, shoppers in the Sainsbury's meat aisle have rammed vegan protesters with their trolleys. We're going to be speaking to someone from the animal rights group PETA to see what this is all about.
I never know how to pronounce PETA or PETA, because the Americans say PETA, don't they? P-E-T-A, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
This is just his long-winded way of correcting me.
Well, I just want to say PETA, but I also don't know how to pronounce the new Vice President of the United States.
Anyway, it's the vegan animal rights group.
Everyone says J.D. Vance, but I say Vance, because I've got an English accent. It's really hard to say words like that, isn't it, when they're American?
Well, I don't know. Let us know what you think. But yes, it's your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. The top story from the newsroom just after 2:30. Well, the owner of the Sun newspaper has issued a full and unequivocal apology to Prince Harry for serious privacy violations and has agreed to pay him substantial damages, settling a long-running legal battle just as it was set to go to court. The apology also extends to the late Princess Diana, acknowledging intrusion into her private life. Former Labour Deputy Leader Tom Watson also received an apology for unwarranted intrusion during his time in government. Well, Prince Harry's lawyer David Sherborne says the illegal activity spanned some 16 years.
The truth that has now been exposed is that News Group newspapers unlawfully engaged more than 100 private investigators over at least 16 years on more than 35,000 occasions. This happened as much at The Sun as it did at the News of the World, with the knowledge of all the editors and executives going to the very top of the company.
The Defence Secretary has issued a stark warning to President Vladimir Putin after a Russian spy ship was located operating off of the UK coast. Speaking in the Commons earlier, John Healey warned the Russian president, quote, "We see you and we know what you are doing." The ship's believed to be used for gathering intelligence and mapping the UK's critical underwater infrastructure. It entered UK waters on Monday, prompting the Royal Navy to deploy 2 ships to track it. A former soldier has admitted murdering his ex-girlfriend, her sister and their mother in a brutal attack with a crossbow and a knife. 26-year-old Carl Clifford tied Louise Hunt with duct tape before shooting her and her sister Hannah at their family home in Hertfordshire. Their mother Carol, wife of BBC commentator John Hunt, was stabbed to death, with Hannah calling police moments before she died. The killings have prompted an ongoing Home Office review into crossbow laws as they remain unregulated in the UK. And just some breaking news to bring you now from Germany. We're hearing that an Afghan national has been arrested there after, sadly, a 2-year-old boy and a 41-year-old man were stabbed to death. 2 others were also injured in that incident in the southern German state of Bavaria. The man, described by police as 28 years old, an Afghan national, as I say, has been arrested following that knife attack. Officers have said at this stage the motive is unclear. We will keep across any details, developments coming to us from Germany on that story. But as I say, at this stage, an Afghan national arrested after a 2-year-old and a 41-year-old have been stabbed to death there. Those are the latest headlines. Sophia Wenzel will have a full roundup at the top of the hour, and Tom and Emily will be straight back with you.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The weather's going to be ramping up over the next few days. Largely fine and pretty calm today. Tomorrow, a spell of wet and windy weather, and then Storm Eowyn arrives on Thursday night and into Friday. There's a little bit of rain here and there this morning. That's tending to peter out. But we've got some showers keeping going across North Wales, West Wales. There's some fog around too over parts of northern England. Quite misty and murky across the southeast. A little damp along the south coast at times. But that mist and low cloud really keeping the temperatures down 3 or 4 degrees here. Elsewhere, a bit of brightness. Could see highs of 6 or 7, but generally still on the chilly side. But at least the winds are light. It means the rain and cloud will be slow to clear from the far southeast. There'll still be a few showers coming into the far northwest, much of the east of Scotland having some brighter spells through the afternoon, but the clear skies here this evening will allow temperatures to fall back down to freezing pretty sharply. Fairly cloudy skies across North Wales, a few showers coming in here, 1 or 2 showers in southwest England as well. The dull, damp, dank, misty weather actually tending to pull away through the night from the far southeast. So many places having a dry night. Again, where we've got any clear skies, there will be some pockets of frost, and there'll also be a little bit of mist and fog around as well. And then later in the night, the cloud increases across Northern Ireland as another spell of rain moves in here. Temperatures, as I said, dipping down close to freezing in most towns and cities, and well below across the northeastern parts of the UK. But further west, temperatures rising through the night as the cloud and the rain moves in. Spell of wet and windy weather. The wind's really whipping up for a time in these western areas as this rain band moves through. Northern Ireland should brighten up for a time before more showers come in. Wales and southwest England looking brighter through the afternoon. That's lively spell of weather clears away, but only opens the door to Storm Eowyn. This is arriving Thursday night and Friday. Damaging gusts of wind are likely. A number of Met Office warnings are in place. Keep up to date with the forecast and those warnings on the Met Office website.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In North Yorkshire, the A64 is closed in both directions between the Barton Hill Crossroads and the Old Malton roundabout after an accident affecting traffic heading away from Scarborough towards York. In West Yorkshire, the A63 is closed each way along Selby Road in Micklefield after an accident. The Mersey Ferry is suspended because of fog. In Staffordshire, the A50 is closed each way along Waterloo Road at Burslem in Stoke-on-Trent after a fire yesterday afternoon. Gatwick Express train services are suspended because of a signalling problem. In Devon, the A38 is blocked westbound by an accident between Wrangleton Cross and Ivybridge, causing queues. In Cornwall, the A38 is closed eastbound from the A390 Island Shop Junction at Liscard after an accident. And also in Cornwall, the A39 is partly blocked by an accident south of Truro, causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 2, and guess who's here? Yes, it's Martin Daubney. He's up at 3. What's coming up?
So, of course, Southport was there, a cover-up. I've got to prevent whistleblower. Astonishing kind of numbskullery going on within that organisation. 3 times they missed him, but they're not even checking for people like him. Obsessed with the far right, former charity workers, not fit for purpose, should prevent, go in the bin. We've got Lee Anderson coming in on that. You can probably guess he'll have a few things to say. And first it was pensioners, then it was farmers, now grieving army families will have their final life payments subjected to a Labour tax raid, leaving children and loved ones missing out on end-of-life payments. Is somebody in the Labour Party just going, right, who doesn't vote Labour? Let's take all their money. It feels like it to me.
It does sound like it, yeah.
You risk your life for your country and, upon death, losing money to the Labour Party. All that, 3 till 6.
Goodness me, sounds like a jam-packed show. We'll be watching.
Yes, they're interested to hear about the insides of Prevent and what's going on there and what are they preventing exactly.
Well, elsewhere, Donald Trump was blasted at a prayer service yesterday in Washington National Cathedral as a bishop directly confronted him over LGBT rights and immigration policies.
Yes, so it was Bishop Marianne Edgar Bood. She used the service on Trump's first full day back in office to make an impassioned plea for mercy towards vulnerable communities.
Well, let's take a listen to what she said.
In the name of our God, I ask you
to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives.
Is that an abuse of her position? Let us know. Of course, this all comes as Donald Trump is slashing diversity and inclusion across all departments in Washington. And there is a question whether we should emulate this in the United Kingdom.
Goodness me, well, let's put this all to human rights campaigner and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation, Peter Tatchell. Peter, what's your view of this bishop, then, at this religious service, bringing quite a lot of politics into it?
Well, I was brought up in the church. I was a deeply, profoundly Christian young man. I was a Sunday school teacher. So I know all about the Christian values of love and compassion. And I think it's those values that the bishop was espousing. She was talking about being kind to others. She didn't mention the parable of the Good Samaritan, but that very important part of the Bible is all about taking care of others. Blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, blessed are the peacemakers. These are fundamental Christian values, and it's quite right that the bishop reminded Donald Trump and J.D. Vance of those values, which in many ways his policies or their policies seem to be putting under threat.
But which policies? I mean, are transgender people at some massive risk now, and what of?
Well, we've just heard today that LGBT plus content has been purged from many government websites. So it means information, support, and guidance for LGBT plus people has been erased. That is profoundly shocking. And when we look at migrant families, you know, the vast majority of migrants in the United States are legal, lawful migrants who have been accepted by the United States and who are doing a great job. They're
But
paying
exactly,
taxes.
Peter, is Donald Trump not talking about illegal migrants?
Well, he is talking about illegal migrants, but the rhetoric is so inflammatory at times, suggesting that they're rapists and criminals and gang members. That is not true either. You know, the migrants some of them may be illegal, but the vast majority of them are fleeing genuine persecution and hardship. And if they were allowed into the United States, most of them, like the existing current legal migrants, would be doing great jobs.
Peter, I don't think you can say everyone crossing the southern border into the United States is fleeing persecution. I mean, come on.
Sorry?
I don't think you could say that everyone crossing the southern border into the United States from Mexico is fleeing persecution. Come on.
No, I'm not saying everyone is, but many are. Many are coming from further down in South America, fleeing terrible violence in El Salvador, for example, or fleeing the persecution of the tyrannical Nicaraguan regime. Those people deserve sanctuary, I believe.
It's an interesting point. Of course, there have been, I think it's more than 10 million people across the southern border, nearer 15, which does sound like a large number. Perhaps people seeking out better economic futures for themselves more than refuge, but I suppose that is still a contested...
Some will be... there will be gang crime. We know that is a fact. Peter can't avoid it. But just very quickly, on the point of diversity and equity and inclusion jobs that he's scrapping the lot in government departments. Apparently in this country, we have the biggest industry of diversity and inclusion behind the United States. So per capita, we have the most people working in diversity and inclusion jobs. I mean, is that really going to grow the economy, Peter?
Well, it's still a very tiny minority of jobs and salaries, a very tiny minority. But the value of those jobs is measured in research. Research by both government departments and private companies show that where they are inclusive, where they affirm employees who are black or ethnic minority or LGBT or disabled, they tend to get a stronger commitment from those employees who work harder, who give greater productivity and value for their work, and who stay with their company. So the company doesn't have to hire new people, retrain them at great cost, and so on. So it's a win-win-win to have diversity and equality policies. But, and this is a big but, we shouldn't exaggerate how many jobs there are. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. It's a pinprick on government expenditure.
It's really not. Well, every business seems to have one. Every government department seems to have multiple
It'll
jobs.
be fascinating to see which companies do better, those with them or without them, as time goes on. But Peter Tatchell, for now, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Good Afternoon Britain.
Thank you, Peter. Now, shoppers have rammed vegan protesters with trolleys in a Sainsbury's meat aisle.
I asked her to excuse me. We're not moving. I asked her to excuse me. You don't control my passage anywhere, okay?
Excuse me. I want to get past here.
Go around, madam.
No, I'm not going round. You move.
Goodness me, well, customers repeatedly asked demonstrators to move before using their carts to try and force their way past.
Fair enough, I think. We're joined by Senior Media and Communications Manager at Peter, Jennifer White. Jennifer, what do you make of this? I mean, it seems an absurd form of protest to stop people just doing their weekly shop.
Well, when you consider that billions of animals are killed every single year to be turned into nuggets or burgers, you really can't blame anyone for trying to draw attention to how cruel and unnecessary this is. And look, it's a peaceful protest, and it's highlighting how animals suffer for their flesh. And we know in the meat industry that animals are strung upside down, they have their throats slit, often while they're still conscious, and it's just absolutely unacceptable. So, of course...
Yes, you're describing halal slaughter there, though. I mean, most meat isn't produced in that way, which some campaigners do see as a particularly cruel way to kill animals, stringing them up and slitting their throats. I mean, that is something that's unique to a religious form of slaughter. I suppose you can be against halal slaughter and still be in favour of the much more humane methods of slaughtering animals that do exist.
Well, that was the point of this protest. There is no humane way to kill someone who does not want to die. And look,
someone
you know, of
or
course
something?
Someone. Animals are individuals, but you know, the reaction here, we're not always expecting people to like being confronted with the fact that animals suffer in order to be turned into, you know, burgers and so on. But sometimes you have to be bold to get that message across, to shake people up, to get them to question their decisions.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you think it was wrong of the shoppers to use their trolleys? Because I can imagine if I'd been in that situation, I would have been rather miffed, to say the least.
Well, the vegan movement is based in non-violence, so of course there is some irony there. But look, there is not one type of activism that is going to resonate with everyone. But, you know, that's why you've got to try all sorts of different things. And actions like this, they are going to change minds. And there will have been someone, you know, whether in the supermarket or whether they've seen this clip online, and it is going to make them, you know, want to do better for animals. It's so easy to make these kind choices.
OK, well, Jennifer White, Communications Manager at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, thanks indeed for joining us.
There you go. Let us know what you make of that. gbnews.com/your say. Were the shoppers wrong to use their trolleys?
Yes, plenty more to come up, though. Prince Harry, indeed, his record win against the News International newspapers next.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biosimulators also became very popular. And
So what do you mean by biosimulators?
biosimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in a form of mesotherapy considered as a biosimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose, as a practitioner or surgeon, very carefully, and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face after all, your body after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible, and sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 2:50, and Prince Harry's lawyer has hailed today as a monumental victory after the Duke of Sussex has settled his legal action against the publisher of The Sun over allegations of unlawful information gathering.
Yes, News Group newspapers offered a full and unequivocal apology to the Duke of Sussex and will pay substantial damages as the two sides settled their legal claim, Harry's barrister told the High Court.
Well, let's get all the lowdown now with our royal correspondent Cameron Walker outside that same High Court. Cameron, what happened today?
Yeah, Tom, well, it's certainly going to be celebrations in Montecito for Prince Harry today. That is because, as you said, he has settled his case with News Group newspapers alongside Lord Watson as well. And it is pretty historic because it is the first time that the Sun newspaper in particular has admitted any liability for their use of private investigators carrying out unlawful information gathering activities. News Group newspapers offered an unequivocal apology, as you said, as well as an apology to Prince Harry for the intrusion into his private life and that of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. But his lawyer, following the settlement in court today, came outside the court, David Sherborne KC, and he had some pretty strong words today, words to say. Let's take a listen.
Many of those behind these unlawful practices remain firmly entrenched in senior positions today, both within News UK and other media outlets across the world, wielding editorial power and perpetuating the toxic culture in which they continue to thrive. It's perhaps no surprise that all of their senior executives and editors refused to turn up to court to give evidence. The failure of each of these key individuals to come and answer questions under oath spoke volumes in itself, but their collective silence is deafening. Today's result has been achieved only through the sheer resilience of Prince Harry and Tom Watson, whose willingness to take News Group newspapers to trial has led directly to this historic admission of unlawfulness at The Sun.
Now, News Group newspapers have denied those specific allegations and say if it was going to go to a full trial, they would have strongly challenged it with a number of experts to clear their name. But this does have wider implications. This isn't just about Prince Harry and his millions of pounds in order to bring this legal challenge, because a lot of people, 1,300 people, have settled with The Sun outside of court over similar allegations of unlawful information gathering. The Sun and News Group newspapers have never admitted to illegality, and that remains the case today. But the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has spoken to the BBC in the last hour or so, says it is clearly unsatisfactory that ordinary people would likely not be able to pursue lengthy cases in the courts like the Duke of Sussex did against News Group newspapers. So it looks like the government are going to be looking into this as just to how easy it is for ordinary members of the public to access legal aid in cases such as this against these big, giant media corporations. Tom Watson also says he's going to deliver a dossier to the Metropolitan Police to launch criminal investigations. The Metropolitan Police says no information has been received from him as of yet. As and when it happens, they will investigate and update us. But of course, no criminal investigations are happening as of yet.
Thank you very much, Cameron Walker. They're outside the High Court. A win for Prince Harry. Now, we've come to the end of the show. Tomorrow, we are, of course, going to be covering the sentencing of the Southport killer, which is due to start, I believe, at 11 a.m. tomorrow. But we'll see. These things sometimes don't always take place when they're supposed to.
But it will be a monumentous day, so do be with us there for all of the fallout. We will learn so much, and we don't want you to miss a single second of it. But for now, stick with us here on GB News. Martin Daubney is up next.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather updates from the Met Office. Here on GB News, relatively calm tonight with a touch of frost and a few fog patches. A wet and windy spell tomorrow, and then Storm Eowyn arrives on Friday. Right now, though, kind of the calm before the storm. Not many isobars on the charts. The winds are pretty light.